great to be here and not having the responsibility of the organization of the event. I'm really enjoying it. It's an absolute privilege to welcome Professor Diane Coyle. She's one of the most influential economists, public economists, and a leading voice on how the field and the discipline should evolve and is evolving. She is a Bennett Professor of Public Policy at the University of Cambridge. She's also the co-director of the Bennett Institute for Public Policy, and she is reshaping and she has reshaped the debates around productivity, technology, and how we measure economic progress. And all these things, of course, have an important gender aspect to it. She has held senior roles in public service, including vice chair of the BBC Trust and the membership of the UK Competition Commission. Through her scholarship, public service, best-selling books, and I'm currently reading Cogs and Monsters, which I totally recommend, she has made complex economic ideas accessible to everyone. She's demonstrated the power of economics when it is rigorous, relevant, and rooted in real-world problems and impacts. Now, at the time when the profession is working to become more inclusive and more representative through initiatives such as UK WEN, Diane is a true role model, and she's certainly a role model to me, and for women in economics more generally. She is independent, she is innovative, and unafraid to challenge established thinking. And I think many of you here would sympathize with that. She was awarded a Damehood in 2023 for her contributions to economics and public policy. So I don't know what else to say. Please join me in welcoming Professor Diane Coyle.
So thank you, Almudena, for that really generous introduction. These are somebody's glasses here. you might need them. So it's a real privilege to be here. So thank you to all of the people at the bank and the Women Economics Network. It's a great privilege to be joining the triumvirate of the Royal Economic Society presidency. So I wanted to start with this picture from the Digital Economics Network conference last November. I'm always really horrified when I see a photograph of myself because of how short I am, but also being the only orange person here in the picture. Everybody else is in grey and navy. So this took place last November. The network's 3 years old. If you count in the photograph, about a quarter of the participants there are female, which is a little better than I had expected. My area of research is digital economy and AI, economic impacts, productivity, and it has been that since the mid-1990s. And so I spend a lot of my time working with computer scientists, with people in AI, and those are even more male-dominated worlds than economics. I thought it might be worth saying just a few words about how I got to this position today. And it's been a very varied kind of journey. I did a PhD at Harvard by accident because somebody ahead of me in college had got a scholarship to Harvard. And I thought, well, if that bloke can do it, I'm going to have a go as well. And was a bit taken aback when I actually got in and they funded me. I then came back and I worked in the Treasury for a bit in the mid-1980s. Then I switched to the private sector, as so many people from the civil service were doing at the time. It was the era of Big Bang. I did macro forecasting for a couple of years. Then I thought I fancied journalism, so via an internship, I went into financial journalism, spent a long time doing that, ended up as economics editor of The Independent. Then I got a bit bored with that too, and I had kids, and it was hard working with 2 children and doing a full-time job in journalism. So I set up a consultancy and started to do public service roles part-time as well. including the Competition Commission as it was then, and beyond that, Migration Advisory Committee, BBC Trust, and so on. And then I got a phone call from the University of Manchester saying our students are a bit fed up because they think that what they're being taught has nothing to do with the real world. We noticed that you've had something to do with the real world. Will you come and be a professor here, set up some new courses? So I did that. That was 2014, moved to Cambridge in 2018, and here I am. It turns out that I'm an academic. So the point of all this is that this sort of varied career path is actually not atypical of senior women in any field. And on the one hand, it speaks to the obstacles in the way of standard career progression. On the other hand, it points out that in a way there's more forgiveness of weird ways of getting to places. And that's an upside, if you like, of the kinds of structural barriers that women face in their careers. And so one lesson I've taken from my own experience is to take advantage of opportunities to do things in a slightly weird way, because it's possible. So one of the daunting things about speaking to you today is that you've probably heard a lot of the stuff about the lack of diversity in economics before. So what could I say that was new? I asked Gemini 3.5 what the proportions were in other academic fields, and picked out ones that I thought were probably quite male-dominated, and so here are the figures. Economics is mid-pack here, not too bad. And of course, there are other fields that skew the other way. So here we do better than computer science, which is certainly my experience, better than engineering. But there are some natural sciences which skew female, and biology and psychology, I think, would be there. Other medical sciences, and of course the humanities and so on as well. We are in STEM world, so I think that is perhaps a bit of a problem in the period ahead when all the emphasis will be on STEM subjects. The question this raises for me is, what is the right proportion? When does a discipline become too skewed? Is being too female a problem for some of the other disciplines as well? And so my hunch is yes. Some fields are too skewed, and economics is. And for economics, I think it's because we are a social science. Although very technical, although can be quite mathematical, we are a science that is very influential in society and needs to represent society adequately. And that might not be 50-50, but it's probably better than 1 in 4. I don't know, so that's a question for everybody. What is the right proportion? What is our target here? Is it 50-50? And also, how do we align thinking about the female share in economics with thinking about other aspects of cognitive and social diversity, such as ethnic and cultural origin or social origin as well? So let's discuss that when we get to it. The next chart really shocked me, actually. This is from the REPEC Registered Economists, so it's a very large sample. It's global. I didn't pick out UK or Anglophone countries particularly. But what's shocking to me about this is that it flattens. For the past 20 years or so, it's approximately flat. Now, this is a period when the profession's been expanding, so the numbers are probably going up. But this is despite all of the efforts that the profession here and in the United States have been putting in to increase the share of women in economics. I mean, we've had the Epstein revelations. Hopefully, behavior of Larry Summers is an extreme example of how senior men behave in the profession. But the question this poses to me, and again, I hope we might come back to discuss this, is 1 in 4 the limit of what the systems that's currently structured will tolerate? Because the efforts that have been going on to increase the share of women, to increase the diversity of the profession, have been incredible. Really, a lot of energy has gone into it. They're great schemes. But is there something more structural that we need to think about as well? Again, let's come back to that discussion. I then used the REPEC figures to look at fields. Now, you won't be able to see this in any detail, but it's not going to surprise you what the female share is in different subfields of economics. So the only one where women make up more than half the researchers is gender. The one at the left-hand side is sport. Economics is sport. I mean, come on, lionesses, huge business. So that actually really surprised me. But the rest of it is less surprising. So on the left, the lower proportions, it's econometrics, game theory, IO and competition, central banking, growth, even economic geography, regulation. And on the right-hand side, it's labor economics, cultural economics, education, development, developing countries. So on the left-hand side, more theoretical and technical. On the right-hand side, more applied and socially relevant. So in a sense, that's not too surprising on the whole. But again, I think it might be a problem. Why are we selecting ourselves in this way? And does it matter? What is the right proportion? What is the gradient of this slope that one might expect in an ideal world? As I said, I do a lot of work with computer scientists. They are expanding into economics. They are thinking a lot about social choice theory, about productivity, not surprisingly. And I would love it if more economists actually would get into that area, which is on the left-hand side here. So if anybody is interested in expanding their research into digital economics, computer science, productivity in public services, what could be more applied than that? Then I'd love to talk to you later on. So why does this matter? It matters because cognitive diversity leads to better outcomes. And there is now quite a lot of science behind this, which I'm sure people have spoken to this group about before. And here are some of the metaphors that are used in the literature. On the left, that there are multiple paths to reach the summit. You're more likely to reach that summit if you take advantage of the multiple paths to get there. There are different perspectives that shape how people see and understand the world, and even construct the evidence that they use to understand what's happening. These are geographical projections, map projections. Donald Trump has a particular projection of Greenland that makes it look especially large and important. How might the world be different if he'd used a different map projection? So the difference of perspectives shapes people's ways of understanding, shapes the questions that people will ask. I mean, this is fundamentally why diversity of experience matters. It's about what do you think is important, and the research questions and the applied policy or business questions that you bring to your work. And then on the right-hand side, monocultures are sterile. There's a famous book by James Scott, Seeing Like a State, where he recounts the tale of German forests being tidied up in the 19th century so that you got rows of trees, they were more economically efficient, they could be harvested more efficiently, and then they died because they became monocultures. And so monoculture is bad for any discipline. I think in economics, we do have a strong monoculture, and that's why some economists very strongly identify themselves as heterodox, because they're identifying the strength of that monoculture, and I think that's bad for the discipline. So a narrow pipeline, a narrow set of perspectives, narrows the scope of economics, reduces the quality of the work that's done, because any field is defined by its people, by their interests, by their experience, by the questions that they ask, by the evidence that they look for. Economics has been really influential, so influential that many people now think that the neoliberal economy that we see was shaped by economists and the way that economists think. And there is a backlash to that. Many people think that big companies are exploiting everybody on the basis of a prevailing vision of economic theory, which they themselves probably learned as students. So I'm going to do a quick plug for the two books. Cogs and Monsters is quite a lot about the character of economics, particularly in the context of digital change. Measure of Progress is more recent. It's excellent. Please go and buy it. So what conclusions do we take from this? One is that we should look to ourselves and think about whether we are taking the most straightforward routes, or are there more varied, more challenging, more interesting routes that we could be taking in our own careers. And by that, I refer particularly to that point about different fields of economics. Communicating what we do, the sophistication of economic theory and applied work as it is done in universities now is still quite remote from what people are being taught. Core is a fantastic innovation, but not all students are being taught that curriculum. So let's carry on to do that work, do the outreach, present role models, and all of the good things that the network is doing. And changing what we do as well. What do we think is important? What about our experiences should we be bringing to bear to shape our own field? Because the field doesn't happen to us. We happen to it. We are shaping it. So a few things there for us to talk about in the discussion, and thanks very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Diane. So now we'll be taking questions from the floor. I guess I'll take a couple of questions from the floor. Maybe then I'll go to the online questions. So anybody has any questions or comments? Go ahead, Emma.
Thank you so much for that talk. It was fascinating, horrifying, all of the above. Can you go back to the chart of when we flatlined? Oh, sorry, Diane.
Yes, I can go back.
I'm sorry. Because it occurs to me that happens around about 2007 and the financial crisis. And I can't help but think the perceptions of what economists do, which often is so closely linked to finance, have been just so damaged by not only the financial crisis itself, but then the subsequent movies. I mean, The Wolf of Wall Street. What young girl would watch The Wolf of Wall Street and then think, oh, what a fabulous cocaine-sniffing career I'd like to have in economics. So, do you think there is anything, I mean, I wonder, I feel like the UK particularly hasn't recovered from the financial crisis and the perceptions of the financial crisis more than the US. So I'd be interested to know if the same flatlining is happening in the US, but do you think there's any way this financial crisis, perceptions of finance and the economics is a career in champagne and cocaine has impacted this chart?
Okay, I'm too short to reach it anyway. Somehow I missed out on the career of champagne and cocaine. And I know correlation isn't causation, but that's also when UK productivity started to flatline. So I think there is something in that argument, but I think it's broader than just finance. I think there is a sense that the world that economists have shaped in the post-war era is not working for people. And the financial crisis was obviously a huge rupture, particularly in the UK, in normal people's experience of the economy. But I would point to many other markets that are not working well, whether it's tech markets that are so concentrated, insurance markets where your insurance doesn't want to pay you, energy markets because so the whole market system, and that plays into the populist moment that we find ourselves in as well. So I do think there is something in that timing. I'm much less clear about what we do about it.
Thanks. Joe.
One of the things that I'm wondering about, because I've got children of a certain age, is whether we're contributing to any discussion about the A-level economics curriculum, which does seem kind of not really very connected to what we do in universities and the whole discussion about what economists do, which was quite an interesting one, I think, a few years ago, and I think in a way that's what many of us think about. But I think there is a connection there. I don't know whether it's being explored very much.
I don't know, but I was going to ask Claire about that, because economics departments look for people who've got maths and computer science rather than economics A-level.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the reason we've been thinking about economics A-level is because you're more likely to study economics. And one of the barriers is women say, I mean, you see it in the numbers, and they say they don't want to study economics. at university, in part because it's unfamiliar to them, whereas people who've done A-level economics are more likely to. So that's the sort of logic of that. Of course, you don't need to study economics to go to university, but it takes, I think, a slightly braver person to sign up to do 3 years in a subject they've not studied before. And I do think, actually, rightly or wrongly, like, men are a bit more confident about doing things like that than women are. Some men, I would say I think the differences within genders are greater than between, but, so what's one of the reasons there is how do we address this point about giving women the confidence to study a subject that will benefit them and will benefit society? I think it's a really interesting question about the curriculum because, I occasionally go and teach economic A-level students when I'm doing my sort of around the schools. It's a much more interesting curriculum in terms of, it's not finance, it's also not like a load of theory. It's like, here's practical things around you. So it's much, it's much more about the things that are happening in the world and how do we understand them, because it's basically, it's a much more engaging subject than when you get to university and suddenly it's like, here you are, learn about vectors. Which is like not exactly going to think, I want to spend the next 50 years of my life doing this subject. When actually, this drives me, I think Karen's absolutely right. It's got a massive image problem, economics, because if you ask people what an economist does, they sort of better think about that bit on the news where they talk about the stock market and the exchange rate. That's not what most economists are doing. Most economists are out doing really practical things. When I ran the government economic service, most of them are doing things like assessing whether a drug should be used in the NHS, right? That is like absolutely fascinating life-changing work that's really practical, but that's not what people outside the profession think we're doing. What we do here at the bank, this is having an impact on people like every day, whether they are trying to, get access to a bank account or they've got a mortgage. But we're really struggling to communicate that. And I think if we could explain to young people what you do can have, whether it's development economics, it's gender economics, whether it is, really technical things, quantitative easing, right? That has a real impact on people. There's no reason why you can't go and do that and you can't be really excited by it. But I think we have got this image problem. I think it's a really interesting point you make about when this chart flatlines, but it's dreadful.
Can I add doing market design for AI algorithms?
Yeah, fascinating.
Very practical.
And totally will impact all of us. In a way we probably don't see, but...
I'll take, we have many questions, okay, let me see. Let's go over there. We have a question in that, yeah.
Hi, thank you, Diane, for your presentation. Actually, I was one of the moaning Manchester students, so thank you for bringing some more real-world application into our degrees. Just from really interesting to hear, and also what Claire was saying about the pilots you're doing, Bank of England, training non-economics teachers to teach A-level economics, because something I found as a barrier was I went to an all-girls school, economics A-level wasn't taught, so I had to go to another school in my borough that was like 3-4 miles away to do A-level economics, and it was only by doing A-level economics that I realised, actually I don't want to study geography, I want to study economics instead. And a couple of weeks ago, I went back to my old school and I went to the Year 11 careers fair and I had a stall about economics. I work in the GES, so I was talking about GES and I had a kind of map showing my career journey. And I was trying to say to girls, I went to this school and I'm now an economist. And some of them had heard of economics, but the bulk of them, like in terms of GCSE A levels, there were some sixth formers there, and I remember this from my time, it was either you're really interested in society, so you do sociology, history, politics, or you're very into sciences, so you do like maths, biology, chemistry. And then I was trying to say, but there is kind of another path, which is kind of social sciences, which is kind of the best of both worlds. You get to do some maths, you get to do some essay writing, but it just feels like from an earlier age, this kind of in school, there's not really this exposure to like social sciences and in particular economics. And I think it's really good that the bank's doing this pilot, but I just wonder why, there are a lot of economics graduates around there. Why aren't we encouraging them to go into schools and teach for a couple of years and then to go on into like the GS, Bank of England? I feel like there could be a lot more incentives to encourage economic students to give teaching a try for a few years.
I think there's a structural issue in the UK education system, which is forcing people into one path or the other much too early. And in American and other school systems, you study a much wider range of subjects for much longer. there's a famous essay by C.P. Snow about the two cultures where he talked about people who do humanities and people who do sciences never talking to each other and how wide that chasm is. And then 10 years later, he wrote a supplement about what he called the third culture, which was the social sciences, which are much harder but also much more interesting than following either path. So somehow we've got to change our image and paint ourselves as, the interesting, the really interesting subject, because you can span such a wide range of techniques, subjects, and bring disciplinary lenses to bear on it.
Sorry to take the mic again, but we're always looking for really practical things we can do. And this just brings to mind, I think, Lisa, maybe a takeaway for you and I. I think we should have a section of the website which is, I am an economist. This is what I do. Maybe what will reach out to all of you. And if you can send us a paragraph of what exactly that means, because all of us are doing very diverse things with economics. But I think even just documenting that on a website that you can drive people to might really help with that perception of this is what it means from a day job. And it's so varied. I think we could do something really fun with that.
Yeah, great idea.
Please come back to us when we ask for that paragraph.
So there is a question right here at the front.
Thank you. On this same theme about encouraging women in economics, I've had experience both as an employer and as a mother with a daughter now going through A-levels. And I've often spoken at her school, which is a girls only, encouraging girls to get interested in economics. And a lot of them were, and they loved the idea, and they loved the variety of things. But where did the school fail in channeling that interest is in the teaching of maths. So to me, the problem starts earlier. It starts in the teaching of maths. I'm at the risk of exaggerating here, but in this country, I'm not sure why there are so many students who are encouraged to study maths. If they're not stars, they're discouraged early on, and that already forecloses them from pursuing that career. So there is a risk that we encourage a lot of economists amongst women who are then unable to pursue that, because then even if they go through maths and try and get a good grade, when it comes then to applying at universities, that funnel narrows enormously, because then they're in competition with international students who come from countries where maths is taught really, really well, who have those A stars, etc. And therefore their opportunities drop like a stone. So examples will say, I wouldn't advise you to do this because you're not going to get into the top schools. You might get soon a low grade. So I'm thinking we should probably broaden our thinking around what are our expectations to open these professions at university level. Because obviously then there are different criteria when those places are offered.
There is a campaign to reform the maths curriculum, but I don't know how effective it is. Conrad Wolfram is involved in that.
All right, so many questions, so I guess we'll take this one on.
Hello, really interesting presentation, Diane. But the thing that struck me was that while we're talking about UK-specific aspects, for example, of our curriculum, what you're referring to here is actually a global phenomena, both in the female share, which is, I can read here because I'm very close, 72,000 registered economists, and then the previous chart around the split in terms of subdisciplines in economics, with women tending to lean towards, as you said, the more applied practical, and males leaning towards not only just computer science, but actually more lucrative in terms of financial economics. So I do wonder if there's an issue there in terms of economics as a discipline and for women more generally.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. These the RepEc figures are global. You can sort them by country, but I didn't do so. So these are likely Anglophone dominated, but they are the global figures. And I think that's a really good point, and one that we should be interrogating ourselves about.
Do we have any questions from the online? Because we have 5 more minutes, and so maybe take a couple of, if you can read two of the questions that we have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Diane. One of the questions from Ella is, she really likes your point about an unconventional path. And she asked if you had any advice, any do's or don'ts for young women that feel they might fit a more unconventional path into economics.
Gosh, it's particularly hard at the moment to give anybody career advice, given the likely shake-up in the job market in the near future. I think it's really just being open to change. And the thing I say to all students now is that it's unlikely that you'll be doing the same job for your whole career. Your career will be long. There's a lot of upheaval going on. And so be open to opportunities. And, that's all the usual things like staying aware of the advertising, but also networking with people, and positively seeking out things that you're interested in. I think people are often quite hesitant, if they have a particular interest, to just write and ask somebody for advice or for openings. So be bold.
Another one?
Thank you. I had a question as well. I was wondering how you think the move to an increasingly digital economy and the growing use of AI is going to affect the gender skew of economics going forward. If people are looking for more of these skills and these are more male-dominated fields, do you think we need to start doing more now to start influencing the pipeline to ensure that when girls are coming into these roles, there are going to be more women?
I think this merges with the discussion about maths and the full range of useful skills. And so we would benefit from learning more about how all of the very influential AI systems are going to be changing the economy, changing the workplace. It works the other way as well. The computer scientists would benefit a lot from talking more to social scientists, because they don't really think about what they're doing and what the implications are going to be. So these are two disciplinary areas that really need to work together. I'm about to submit a bid for some funding for a joint PhD program between computer science and economics, public policy. But I think this is going to be such an influential part of our world. Having the two tribes learn each other's language and techniques is actually really important.
Let's take the last question from you, yes, and yeah, because we have to finish at 10. Yeah, so just the last question, and then we'll have some time to network.
Thank you. That was really insightful. I did want to come back on the point on curriculum. I think, Claire, you made a really good point about how I think people, when they think about economics, they think it's just finance. Yeah, it's just finance, maths, but it's so much more than that. And I only realised it going into university and learning about that. I was like, and then I remember just speaking to people and telling them, oh, economics is literally everything. But yeah, so like the point on curriculum, I was just thinking, what are your views on kind of like starting it from a very young age? Like, I'm not sure if there even is an economics GCSE. So it definitely wasn't in my area. But I think what would have been useful for me, because even when I went to A-level, I didn't know what economics was, and it was never taught to me. But if I knew, I would have definitely done it, because I had such like an interest in like social sciences and maths, and that was like economics was like perfect for me in that regard. But I thought I just liked maths. So yeah, what are your views kind of like in terms of doing it from a very young age in high school?
I'm going to defer to the people who've been working on the curriculum, and maybe Misa wants to take it.
I think the BAM did a study which showed that GCSE economics is offered to very selective grammar schools and also private schools. So I think that is one reason why I think early exposure to economics is not happening across the board, and could be the reason why women, sort of people from more diverse backgrounds are not joining the economics profession. So I think that is definitely something that we need to address. I think the bank is first focusing on A-levels, but maybe GCSE is the next one. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is actually doing GCSE economics and really enjoying it. But the math thing is there, you know, like her brother is brilliant at math, and he keeps on telling her, oh, your math is not good enough. And I think that, and then the teachers also keep on telling her economics is really hard to get into universities. And I think that kind of discouragement, I think, needs to stop. And I think women might need a bit more encouragement to join the discipline, to join the profession. And I think STEM does a lot better in that respect. There's a lot more outreach programs, and maybe there's more to do in economics in the very early stages of the pipeline as well.
My son actually became an economist. I think it started when he played a game called SimCity obsessively as a 5-year-old, and then he went through a phase of saying he would never do economics because his mum did, and then he came back to it, and he's now working for Deliveroo as an economist.
Okay, so with that note, let's go to the coffee break, and we'll have more opportunities to talk to Diane.
Thank you very much.